confirmation that Canada has now filed a complaint with the World Trade Organization over the new U.S. tariffs. Word of that coming as we learn more about that phone call between Donald Trump and Justin Trudeau earlier today. The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick is in the U.S. Capitol with the details.
This phone call has happened, and we're learning some details about it thanks to Donald Trump posting about it on social media and his description of how things went. We knew they were due to talk today, and let's just take a look at what he's posted on social media. So Trump is saying that Trudeau called him to ask what more could be done to alleviate the tariffs. Trump writing that he told Trudeau many people have died from fentanyl that's come through the borders. And the key quote here, Andrew, is where Trump writes, "Nothing has convinced me that it has stopped." Trudeau apparently argued that it has gotten better, but Trump is saying it's not good enough. And this is an interesting part of the description of the phone call, too. He says it ended in a, quote, somewhat friendly manner. And then he goes on to talking about the Canadian election, which I suspect Karina can elaborate on a little bit more. But Trump followed up this tweet with another one shortly after. And in this one, he refers to Justin Trudeau as governor, which is something that he has started doing in the context of talking about Canada becoming a 51st state. For anyone who's interested, I told Governor Justin Trudeau of Canada that he largely caused the problems we have with them because of his weak border policies, which allowed tremendous amounts of fentanyl and illegal aliens to pour into the United States. That's how Trump and some Americans refer to migrants who cross illegally over the border. These policies are responsible for the death of many people. So at this point, Andrew, other than the auto sector, which we'll talk about in a moment, this phone call between them did not result in any lifting of the tariffs. It sounds like Trump is still not convinced that Canada is doing enough to secure the border, despite all the efforts that Canada has made, including appointing a fentanyl czar, including the $1.3 billion border plan that was unveiled weeks ago. The question then I think for Canadian officials is what can they do? What more does Donald Trump want from Canada in terms of the fentanyl issue? Now, that question was just put to Trump's press secretary at the White House briefing. So let's take a listen to how she responded to that question.
Through the northern border in Canada, in last fiscal year alone, there was enough fentanyl seized to kill 4.8 billion people. And that number is up 2,050% from 2023, the year before. So there's been more than a 2,000% increase in illegal fentanyl seizure at the northern border. Why? Because Canada is allowing that fentanyl to come to the United States. The president sees these numbers. He thinks about the lives that are lost. And everybody in this room, I'm sure, everybody watching at home, everybody across the country knows someone in our lives who has been killed at the hands of this deadly poison. There needs to be repercussions for that. The president feels very strongly about it.
Yeah, and she similarly said elsewhere in the briefing, Andrew, there need to be consequences. And again, these tariffs that were imposed yesterday, the U.S. has been tying to the fentanyl issue. There are more tariffs to come that they say are because of just in general unfair trade practices. The reaction yesterday here in the U.S., we saw how the markets reacted. There was other pushback, including from big retailers like the CEO of Target talking about how food prices could jump up just within days. The U.S. imports a lot of fresh vegetables, he was saying, from fruits and vegetables from Mexico, especially during the winter. And one of the other key points here in terms of the defense of using these tariffs by Trump, last night in his speech to Congress, he did acknowledge that there would be, quote, some disruption in the economy, but that it would all be worth it in the end, is essentially his argument. And the press secretary, again, echoing those statements, she was asked how much more should Americans be expecting to pay for goods because of these tariffs. She's not going to put a dollar figure on it, which is not a surprise. But again, we heard a lot of justifications from the White House for these tariffs, and again, laying the blame on Canada for fentanyl still coming into this country.
Okay, the press secretary revealed, though, a major exemption that Canada can benefit from. I mentioned it off the top. And then they also said there might be more exemptions in other sectors. But tell us about the exemption that we do know about, according to the press secretary.
Yeah, so according to the press secretary, there will now be an exemption for the auto sector. So just within 24 hours, essentially, or a little more than 24 hours of these tariffs being imposed just after midnight yesterday, they are set to lift them on the auto sector, but for 1 month. This development comes after apparently Trump spoke to the heads of the 3 big automakers here in the U.S. And we don't have a lot more detail, Andrew, other than that. The press secretary is saying we're giving a 1-month exemption on any autos coming through the USMCA trade agreement between Mexico, Canada, and the U.S. And she also said, when asked if there was room for carve-outs for any other industries, that the president is open to further exemptions, but didn't elaborate on what other sectors might be able to get those exemptions. So I suspect this is what Howard Lutnick was referring to last night and in interviews on American networks this morning when he was talking about some kind of announcement coming today. And now we have this announcement. It is coming from the press secretary. Trump hasn't written any social media posts about it. He doesn't have any events today. So we'll see what other details we can get. But this surely will mean a huge sigh of relief for the auto sector on both sides of the border, given how integrated it is and how severe these tariffs were going to hit that sector. There have been warnings that it could virtually shut down within days.
The CBC's Megan Fitzpatrick speaking to me earlier from Washington.